All right, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ber-Henda Williams. Keep it going, all the way till she gets right here.
The truth at 13. When I was 13 years old, all I wanted to do was be the pretty girl in 17 magazine, except for the truth is, the token black girl in 17 magazine looked nothing like me. I was 5'2", she was 5'7". She was ethnically nondescript, but just enough to say that they had a minority face. The truth at 13. I would thumb through the pages of Ebony and Essence magazine, and though I did see representation of myself, the articles and subject matter were a little bit too mature for me. So middle school was the worst time of my life. It was sort of a social purgatory, and lunch was the worst. I would go into the lunchroom, and oftentimes I would have no place to sit because I was a social pariah. I was quirky and offbeat and wore glasses, and I was considered fat. No one had introduced me to the goddess Hottentot, so I didn't know that I was the first representation of a goddess or God on earth. Didn't know that then. So Joseph Stallworth made it clear to me that boys don't make passes to girls with fat asses. Thank you. So my social savior was my best friend at the time, a young man by the name of Brian Monroe, and I sat at the boys' table, And I would see people point at me and jeer at me, and so it reminded me of my place in the social hierarchy. The only place that I found refuge and salvation were in my stories and in my poetry. And in my head, this world I created where I had hair down to here, and I was smart, and I was witty, and everybody liked me. And that was the place that I felt safe. I would often get chastised for daydreaming in class. So as I transitioned into high school, I flew under the radar, and that's exactly where I wanted to be. And the only place, again, that I excelled was in English and in my Spanish classes. And my beautiful senora introduced me to an artist, Zafik, a German artist who painted pictures of voluptuous women. And she said, Ber-Henda, tú eres un Zafik. You are a Zafik. So again, this is a mythical place, so I can't really relate. And so like all good middle-class parents, I went to see a therapist. And I tell you, I don't know where they find these people. So I was depressed and suicidal because I wore black. Now, I was a little bit of a sharp-witted mommy, so I was like, okay, so then what's your excuse? She was a blonde bombshell. You know, she wore the stilettos and the skirt, and she was in her middle age, and maybe in her prime, she could have been a Bond girl. But really, how can you relate to me? Because they don't call you thunder thighs. They don't make clapping sounds when you walk down the hallway. Okay, so now to boot, there's something wrong with me. I'm depressed and suicidal. Thank you. Meantime, years go by. I'm in high school, and again, flying deep under the social radar. There are all kind of writing competitions and things that come up, but I don't apply to any of those things because I don't fit in and I don't belong. And in this world that I created, even that's falling apart too. And it's hard being a girl that's displaced because, you know what, we all feel displaced. And I didn't have community around me to really support me. And as much as my loving middle-class parents wanted to, they couldn't make Jesus real for me. And church was no better because the church kids, they were cruelest. There was definitely no room at the inn for a girl like me. So I go to an HBCU for 2 years, and while I was there, still didn't quite find a place to belong, because even at a historically black college, I'm still not black enough, because my northern accent and air left a lot to be desired in my classes. And I remember having an argument with Ms. Dacus about where Morocco was. She said the Middle East, and I said Africa, and she said the Middle East, and I said, no, I'm looking at a map. It's Africa. Yeah, so I wasn't very popular there. Because where I grew up, Jesus was black, Ronald Reagan was the devil, and so on and so forth. You get it, right? So, little outspoken in there, went to see another therapist, and I promise you they get their information from fortune cookies. Like, she opened it up and gave me some lucky numbers. I returned home, embarrassed, disgraced, displaced, and I finished up very quietly at Wayne State University, where I cried in between classes because I couldn't find myself. And the truth of it is, I was always with myself if I had just accepted myself. But I didn't have what is now a Jill Scott. I didn't have a Satori Shakur to go to eat lunch with and to tell me that my writing was brilliant, to tell me that I was brilliant and that I mattered. And it breaks my heart every time I hear a girl with an eating disorder or committing suicide or self-mutilation because she curses the day she was born, because she doesn't fit in. And the truth of the matter is, all of our change makers, all of our social justice champions, they never fit in. They always went against the status quo. And so I floundered from job to job, place to place, and I always got the bitter reminders of my social hierarchy and ranking, because I never fit in, I never belonged. So in 2011, the opportunity found me while I was teaching 10th grade Spanish. We had a day of intercession, which is a time where students get to work on projects of their own. And so during this time, we just started talking. I ended up with all the girls. And we talked about everything from God to depression, from anxiety to displacement, for not being good enough, not being small enough, not being tall enough, hair not being long enough, about being functionally depressed, any and everything. And I felt chosen on that day, that God chose me, because you know what? We suffer for not. This experience of being the fat, ugly girl wasn't for me. It was for them. Because God never puts anything on you that you can't bear. So this story that I'm telling to you is not just for me. It's for every girl who suffers in silence, who wants to be noticed, who needs to be validated, because Lupita told us our stories and our dreams are valid. And so those girls came to me, and I said, well, God, what would you have me do? And that's when I started my organization, The Power of Girlhood, because there is power in girlhood. There is power in our stories. There is power in our DNA. And so I listened to those babies, and they have wowed and amazed me. We have a baby, Sheila E., who plays the drums, and I tell you at lunchtime how the boys a beat on the table, she can make a beat for your nerve, she can. How my baby Jayla went before the entire leadership team of the school and pitched her idea on why it was important for her to give back to her community, and not just that, give back to other teenage girls who do not have a home at the age of 16 years old. Beyond that, one of our youngest participants went on CW50 and talked about her transition of not feeling good enough and not feeling smart enough. And we were able to work with that baby and pull things out of her to now she had an interview this week with Detroit Country Day with the hopes of getting a full ride scholarship. And not just that, she texted me and she said, Miss Williams, she said she was so impressed with me because I held myself together, but I did what you told me to do. I smiled. How lethal and impressive is the smile of a girl. She knew who she was. And I was glad to be part of that because you know what? All of those girls were a reflection of me, all of my insecurities, all of my doubt, all of my unawareness. And then I learned that the worst thing in the world is for a goddess to come to this plane and not know her worth. That is a tragedy. Me and the girls sat and we watched statistics and we looked at the genocide, well, the femicide that has happened in Juarez, Mexico. When somebody tapped me, when the girl said, Ms. Williams, that's happening here in Detroit. And she's right. It's happening right here. So this is my truth. I had to heal the inner girl. And as you see these tears that are falling from my unapologetic face, that little girl is still healing. And so I need the love and support of my community so that no girl, at least under my watch, will ever feel like she doesn't have a voice and that she doesn't matter, because girls matter. In our state, in our city, 50% of the households are run by single mothers. So that means we need to see leadership reflective of that. And we have to impress upon our girls that their gifts and their talents and their storytelling, it's not cute, it's not just a hobby. It was what you were birthed to do. Your brilliance has to shine. So to me, that is where I found my healing and restoration. And that to me is social justice. Thank you.
Ber-Henda Williams.